Okay, everybody, let's get started. Hello, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Kelly Brunsheen, and I'm a Senior Coordinator here with TPE. Welcome to the Participant Effects Quarterly Webinar Series. This quarter, we're going to be talking about saving for college. If you have any questions throughout the presentation, please utilize the Q&A tool on the toolbar below. We're going to try to get to everyone's questions as soon as possible, but we may need to follow up with you directly. This is a long presentation and we expect to take the full hour, so if we don't get to your question, don't worry, we're going to email you and follow up with you. Our presenter today is Mehdi Baker. I'm very excited for you to hear from him today. Mehdi graduated from Florida State University with a Bachelor of Science degree, and he excels in educating and motivating his clients to take action to plan their financial future. Throughout today's presentation, we'll be asking for your participation in answering some polling questions. When it's time, a question and answer box will populate, and after everyone's answered, we're going to share only the percentage results with everyone so you can see where your peers have answered. This is confidential, though, and your specific answer won't be shared with anyone, so go ahead and participate. With that being said, let's go ahead and kick off our first polling question. Mehdi, if you could just switch to the next. Yep, perfect, the next slide. Okay, so who here is excited for warmer weather to be here? I know a lot of our clients are Florida-based, so that might already be true. Here we go. All right, so you should be able to click your answers now. First answer would be, not me, it's too hot, bring back the sweater weather. Second one is, yes, warm weather is my jam, summertime fun, here I come. Or, I like all seasons, bring on the change. And I'll give you guys a couple more seconds here. Just a fun question. The questions in the presentation will be more serious and based on saving for college, so. All right, so if you haven't answered, answer it real quick, and I'm going to go ahead and end the polling right now. And then I'll go ahead and share the results with everyone. So you should be able to see the percentage. So everyone's excited for summer. That's great, or more than half of you. That's fantastic. Well, I guess, yeah, like 80% of you. That's great. I'm always hot, so I'm going to miss the cooler weather. But all right. Okay, well, thank you for your participation, and it's my pleasure to introduce Mehdi Baker to talk to us about saving for college. Thank you, Mehdi.
Thank you, Kelly. And I have to say, I do like the colder weather myself, a warm body. But with that being said, let's hop to it. Great question. So we're all here today to pretty much discuss college planning and saving for college. So I think we all know the benefits of a college education, right? You can compete in today's more competitive job market, and it becomes even more competitive as we go. You can increase your earning powers, you can expand your horizons, all great stuff. But like most people, there's a lot of demands competing on your hard-earned dollars. So essentially, there are things out there that we do have to balance in a way, right? You have things like the cost of a new baby or just growing children, uh, monthly mortgage or rent payments. Then you have your car payments. Then there's insurance and all those fun stuff. Then you have to contribute to your retirement plan, right? You're going to be putting money there. That's a priority always. And then you may have your own student loans, uh, debt from school that you need to take care of yourself. And then every once in a while, we all want to take a vacation, let a little bit stress out. So and then you add in the cost of bills and unforeseen things. It's hard to imagine how you could fit paying for your child's college, getting that fund going. But with all that being said, it is really really imperative that you start as soon as you can. So here's another polling question here. With this question, we want to take a look at more so is how much do you think the average cost in 2018, 2019 to attend a 4-year public college or a private university? A, 26,000 for public, about 58,000 for private. B, about 21,000 for public, about 48,000 for private. C, about 15,000 for public, about 28,000 for private. or D, 10,000 for public, about 22,000 for private. So obviously, it's one of these things where some people just have no clue, and that's fine too. I think a lot of people feel that way, especially if you haven't been to college in a while. So here we go. Go ahead, you can answer these questions, and then we'll pull up the results and see what everyone feels.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and share the results so everyone can see.
Mm, okay, okay. So we got half of the people in here pretty much got a good idea of what's going on, and a lot of mixed answers, and it is really all a lot in the up in the air. These numbers are in a way average numbers in a way, so you definitely want to take them with a grain of salt. But with that being said, that's good though. I like those results. And let's go. The answer is B actually. So most of you guessed correctly. Congratulations. And then, so let's move it forward. Come on. Alrighty. So as we discussed, right? This is the average cost here for a year at a public 21,000, private about 48,000. And the key to this slide is why it really makes you ask a question and should answer this question too is why start saving now, and that really comes down to this high cost, right? So according to the College Board, this is the stats that they provided to us. It doesn't include books, personal expenses, or transportation. And then you can go ahead and you can multiply that by four, and you can see how expensive that can be. But and that's really we haven't even factored in inflation, which we'll get to here. So college inflation, it refers to that percentage that it's going to increase every year. It's usually about double the rate of a general inflation, so it's around 3 to 5% a year. So with this example going here, you can see in about 10 years how that change in cost is going to be. It's pretty substantial. And it's more than likely going to continue to rise each year, right? So we can expect about 3 to 5%, and that's in line with historical trends. So that's nothing; those aren't aggressive numbers by any means. And like I said, it could be higher or lower, and it will vary more than likely from public to private colleges, right? So what does this mean to you? You know, what it means is that along with these high costs, they're going to keep increasing, which means you need to start saving as soon as you can. So don't throw your hands up in despair. We have good news for you. Fortunately, your savings isn't going to be the only thing to fund your child's college or children. You're going to have a few things going on. It's one block in this block tower of a way, right? So you have your financial aid. This is going to be where you get your loans, your grants, your scholarships, and work study programs, things like that. Then your income, and oftentimes I personally I worked through college, so I had some income. So income from your child, maybe a part-time job, maybe something on campus, a work study, which kind of goes back to financial aid, but they can do a little bit of something to help pay for things. Then, if need be, and you need to get really creative, there's other options. For example, a HELOC loan, a home equity line of credit, pretty much a low interest loan because they're leveraging and they have your house there, so it's an option. Cost cutting measures. You can go to a community college for the first few years, save a lot of money there. You can get into an accelerated program. There's different ways to be frugal with college instead of going straight to the university and paying that tuition. Then there's that all which we all kind of love, and if we're lucky enough, a generous gift from a relative or grandparents. Nice, all this is going to play into things, and so what all this pretty much means and what we should do in regards to planning is we should plan to save 50% of the college costs for your savings. Then the other factors come into play, right? So now we're just going to kind of give you the an idea of the growth of college funds over time. So this is just an average after tax return of 6%. This is saying you're saving 100, 300, or $500 a month. Pretty much for 5, 10, 15 years, you can see how that accumulates. Uh, and if you look at this here, you really should just these numbers, I know they're large numbers. Like, yeah, putting away $500 a month sounds nice. Putting away $300 a month sounds nice. But you have these other competing interests, as we discussed earlier. A good plan is just to start with whatever amount you can afford, then add to it over the years. A lot of people, they'll get a raise or a bonus or the refunds and taxes, or inheritance, and they'll pretend they never even received that money in a way mentally, and put that towards college savings. So you can just kind of get going with what you have, right? It's more of just creating that behavior, the habit of start saving, and then as you become more aggressive with saving, as you pay down your debts, then you start increasing that number ultimately, and then hopefully you get to where you need to be, and we're hoping to shoot for about 50% of those overall expenses. So with all this being said, we talked about saving, the accumulation, but where do you put that money, right? And you have a few options. Some are a little bit more traditional college planning accounts, some a little bit different, and we're going to kind of cover that here. So you have several options to choose from. Some are, as I mentioned, the more popular ones: 529, Coverdell Education Savings Account, mutual funds, stocks, ETFs, savings accounts, money market funds, CDs, and even a Roth IRA, which we'll get into that one. And Roth, not really for most a college planning vehicle, but it's a retirement vehicle, but it also can be very useful for college planning. So some of these options here, they're taxable, some aren't. So I like to more so focus on the the tax advantage plans here, instead of the just holding a mutual fund or holding a stock or things like that. And also, I want to kind of cover a little bit more, savings accounts, money market accounts, CDs. These are great for short-term savings. They don't yield that much long-term, right? So we don't want to make that your primary saving strategy for college funding because of inflation, right? So if you're getting a CD that's 2% a year or so, college inflation is 3 to 5%. We're not really doing. There's not a lot of traction happening here. So we want to make sure we take advantage of the special tax advantages, for these certain accounts. Also with that, we want to make sure that we are getting a return that can keep up with that inflation. So let's just focus on the accounts here, the tax advantaged college saving vehicles, the 529, the Coverdell, and the Roth. So you ask, why do we need to focus so much on the taxes? Because taxes can take a big bite significantly over time. So depending on the account you use to save, it can make a huge difference to where getting ahead in that game of saving for college. So let's look at an example, give a perspective of the difference that taking advantage of that tax advantage of accounts. So this shows the $25,000 initial investment in 18 over 18 years. One's in a tax exempt account, one's in a taxable account. Exempt account, think of a 529 account, right? Where you put money in there, it accumulates tax free. Then when you pull it out for college expenses, you don't pay taxes or penalty on it. That's tax exempt account. Taxable account, that's just going to be like a regular investment brokerage account with a stock or a mutual fund, or whatever it may be. They're going to be taxed annually. So if you could see over an 18-year period, there's a significant difference of almost $18,000. So that's a lot of money from doing nothing other than saving in one account versus the other, right? So let's talk and focus more on that tax exempt area that we kind of just highlighted here, because that's the most common tax advantage strategy, and that comes to a 529 plan. So you ask, what is a 529 plan? It's a tax advantage college savings vehicle. Pretty much it can be used for K through 12 expenses. It's sponsored by state, so they vary by state. Each state has their own little version, which is vast and varies significantly. But I will cover those in a little bit more in depth here. This account was pretty much created to revolutionize the way parents save for college. It really had a similar effect to a 401k when that first came out, because it just made a lot of tax sense ultimately. Hence, Section 529 is where the name comes through, the 529 plan. It was a tax law that was put into place, a revenue code. So that's where that comes from, and it was specifically designed for college. So it can be used for K through 12 expenses, but if you don't use it for college, there is that penalty, and income taxes may be due depending on how you do withdraw that. So, and looking at things, there are actually two types of 529 plans, and I'm sure y'all have heard about them, but probably not too familiar with the differences. So hopefully we can give, you know, create a little bit of difference here, so you can get an idea of what you need to do and what might be best for you. Ultimately, it might be decided by you meeting with someone to discuss what you need, but hopefully we can give you a good guideline. So there's two plans, right? College savings plan and then the prepaid tuition plan. Both accounts, you're the account owner, your child's the beneficiary. Then you ask, what is the difference? So the college savings plan, that's going to be more similar to a 401k, right? It's going to offer a number of investment portfolios. They're going to range from conservative to aggressive, pretty, I don't want to say somewhat limited options, but you will have different portfolios to choose from, and it depends on the state, what kind of investments are in there. If it's each state has a relationship with a different firm, so your state may have a relationship with American Funds or Merrill Lynch or Fidelity or Vanguard, and it kind of varies per state, but you can more than likely use any state plan. This money from the 529 plans is money that used for tuition, fees, room, and board. Also books, but it has to be at an accredited college. It can be in the U.S. or abroad. So as long as it's accredited college, you can, with the college board, it will qualify. You just need to look that up and confirm that. Then there is the prepaid plan. This is essentially more so like a contract between you and the plan. It covers a certain amount of in-state public tuition based on today's contributions. So you put money in, you pretty much locking up a cost in a way for tuition. Today's of today's value. There's a benefit to that, right? But this is really only used for tuition. It really, some states have it, some states don't have it. If your state does have it, you have to use your state's plan. You can't go to a different place. Versus with a college savings plan, you can go to a different state and shop the market, which is it's a bit more of a market to, in a sense. The college savings plan, that's the most popular one. So let's focus on that. But ultimately, they're both good options, and we'll kind of get into a little bit more specific on an example here soon on kind of how to utilize them both. So moving forward, so college saving options. So the advantage to this, anyone can open an account. Grandparent can open an account for a child. You can open an account for your child. Uncle, you can contribute to someone else's account. If your grandparent owns an account for your child, you can contribute to that account. If you own an account for your children, your parents can contribute to that account. High lifetime contribution limits, usually about 350,000 plus. Every state is going to be a little different, so you want to research that if depending on what you're looking for. These are certain things that kind of help determine which plan you should use for which state. Some of the factors. You control the account funds, so like I said, it's kind of like in a way, um, 401k is it's going to have portfolios in there. More than likely, it's going to be age-based portfolios. What they're going to do is, as the child gets closer to going to college, it's going to make the portfolio more conservative. Very similar to a target date fund in most of your 401ks, 401as, all those plans. So, you know, like pretty much with that being said, it does allow large lump sum tax free gifts, which we'll kind of jump into in a little bit here, but also to the fact that there's a lot of tax benefits, right? So the tax deferred accumulation, tax free earnings, and then when you pull it out, completely tax free at the federal level and usually at the state level too. And then it covers the qualified education expenses, and essentially, the key there, right, is that 100% of the earnings as they accumulated stayed in your account as part of the plan, as part of your college fund, instead of going to Uncle Sam. So the combination, has made these plans very favorable to say for college. As you can see, they're really more favorable than other options that you do have available to you. So as I mentioned with the gifting aspect of it, someone can gift 15,000 a year. It's an annual gift tax exclusion. They can gift it to your child in the 529. Now, some people they want to make a larger gift. It can help for that person's estate planning, right? For whatever aspect, and it can vary. But to make a gift to your child. So With that being said, some people want to make a little bit more than 15,000, and there is something called accelerated gifting, pretty much where you can take 5 years of that 15,000, speed it up, and throw that money into the account. 75,000 for an individual, 150,000 for a couple. You're just doubling it. That's if you want to make a lump sum gift. No gift tax will be owed as long as certain conditions are met. Right? They can't make any more gifts for the next over the next 5 years, and essentially after that, though, they will be able to jump right back into it and continue with making those gifts if they see fit at that time. So go to the we talked about the good stuff. Let's talk about the not so good stuff, the limitations. Everything's going to have some limitations. It's very important to understand that. With the 529 plan, the college saving plan, returns aren't guaranteed, right? So you can have a portfolio that's going to be tied to the market. It's going to go up and down depending on how conservative it is. More aggressive, it's going to be more volatile. More than likely, you will adjust that, and if you're using those funds that adjust by themselves, they will do that. You're limited to the plan's investment portfolio, so it's important that you really do your research on the money managers involved in that specific plan, right? I would lean towards a plan of a fund manager, money manager that you're comfortable with, you're familiar with, someone that you value. Um, Popular ones, right? Capital Group, American Funds, Fidelity. I mean, the list goes on. So you want to look at that, and you're going to be limited to their investment portfolio. So you want to make sure it's a quality portfolio. But with all that being said, for the most part, these plans are very, very well vetted, and they're suited to meet your goals. They're very well off in that regards. Now, in regards to what you have invested in the account, you can make changes on that. Let's say it's too conservative, it's too aggressive. You can make changes twice per year. But the money that goes into it that you're putting in, monthly, that can be adjusted to whatever fund or wherever risk tolerance you want. You can do that, monthly. But changing the investments inside of that can only be done twice per year. Then there is that thing. If you don't pull the money out for college, income tax and penalty, right? So, you can do math, 25% income tax, 20%, whatever it may be, 28%, and then there's a penalty with that also. Then there's fees and expenses. These are important to consider. Now, this is again comes to some of the differences of the 529 plans out there. They have different fees and expenses. Some have upfront charges, some have annual fees, some don't have annual fees, some have higher fees than other internally. It's one of those things where you do have to look at the different options, compare the fees and expenses associated with that. Now, another option, Coverdell account. This account primarily was created for um, you know K through 12, but it has become a very useful tool for college expenses also. This account works very similar to a 529 in the way taxes, but $2,000 maximum annual contribution. The value to this one here is if you like an investment, if you want to buy a particular investment stock, et cetera, this is the kind of account you would be able to do so, right? So this is an account where you're going to be able to, let's say you're favorable, you like Apple, Tesla, whatever it may be, you can buy that stock inside of this portfolio, right? So if there's something you like, go for it. This is a great tool to use alongside a 529 account. Obviously, the contribution, the max level isn't significant, right? And it'd be hard to match anything near what college will cost, but it'd be helpful as a combination with the other strategies. But not everyone can open this account, right? So if you're filing jointly, 190,000. If you're single filing, 95,000. So if you go about 10,000 over, there's a range where you can make partial contributions, but for the most part, it kind of takes you out of the rate for this horse here. But ultimately, there are those other options, but this is most people should be able to qualify on this end of things. Now, this is where you get a little bit more creative with this, and it gets a little more exciting. Retirement savings vehicles. We can use a Roth for this, for college funding, and a lot of people aren't aware of that, but it's actually a really good tool, especially because it does kind of start working towards two goals at once. So ideally, right, it's a retirement savings vehicle. It works great for college savings too. So once you turn 59 and a half, as you can withdraw funds for any purpose, right? College, retirement, whatever it may be. So there's a lot of flexibility though. But if you're younger than 59 and a half, you can pull funds out without the penalty. So the 10% penalty is waived. You will have to pay. income on the earnings from that Roth. Not on what you contributed, but that's not that significant when you look at the general scheme of things here of what this account can do. So if you do waive that penalty, you can use it for, that's for college. So that you can there is a provision there for you to take advantage of that. And then a big part of this too is this asset isn't calculated into financial aid formulas. So it's pretty important to consider this option, right? Not only does it meet a couple goals at once, but it really doesn't have an impact on your child's potential aid award. But you do have to consider though withdrawals will count towards your income. So you might this is kind of a tip, consider waiting until after January 1st of your child's second year of college to withdraw from a Roth. So, if you can see where I'm going with that is you want to utilize these different tools in different ways, right? To take advantage of the tax advantages, but also just make sure you have flexibility to where if the child doesn't go to college, if they go to college, you kind of have options here. If you need to start saving for retirement, there's a balance there. So, but you do have to keep in mind, right? If you use funds from your Roth, this does mean that there will be less available for retirement. And, it can make a big difference, especially when you talk about the tax advantages over a long period of time. So it is something to consider. It's a great tool. We just have to weigh the pros and cons of it. And then, as I mentioned, there's you know, the contribution limits. All right. So we look at the different options here, right? You have mutual funds and stocks. So let's just kind of think about mutual funds and stocks outside of these tax accounts because they're inside of a lot of these accounts, right? The funds, and you could buy stocks in the Coverdell and Roth, etc. So let's just kind of talk about them outside of the account. They offer variety and flexibility, thousands of funds and stocks to choose from, right? And they can be used for anything. Flexibility is great. They offer high rates of return, but there's risk, higher returns than savings accounts, money market accounts. So that's a pro, right? But there's no guarantees. So they try to achieve higher rates of return. Like I mentioned, though, that means higher degree of risk for you. So what's the drawback of using mutual funds and stocks for college? They don't offer any tax advantages. So as we mentioned earlier in the earlier slides, we compare the tax invest to a tax-free one. It made a big difference, right? So it was about an $18,000 difference. You start with 25,000, 6% annual rate of return over 18 years, big difference. So even though these are great options, they're flexible, etc., they're less attractive as the main component of your long-term college saving strategy. These investments are better to be held within the tax advantage accounts. But remember, I want to emphasize this, all investing involves risk. So you can possible loss of principal, there's no guarantee. So let's recap the options that we've discussed here and put them in a clear chart here. As you see here, you have 529 plans open to anyone, right? No matter how much you make, mutual funds and stocks, anyone can get in those too. The Coverdell, right? There's income limitations, or Roth income limitations. The 529 plan pretty much is 350,000 plus, so it'd be tough to really max that out. Coverdell, right? 2,000 a year. Roth, 6 to 7,000, 6,000 if you're under age 50, 7,000 if you're older than that. Mutual funds and stocks, you can buy as much stock in mutual funds as you want, right? Then it comes to investment control. Some people that's not that big of a factor right there. They just want to leave it to the pros. I'll let the pros handle money managing it because that's what they do for a living. But if you like a little bit more control, you can look at the Coverdell and the Roth, and obviously mutual funds and stocks. But the 529 plan, you're going to kind of be limited to their investment options, but it's not a bad thing at all. Sometimes it's a good thing not to have control of your investments, especially during emotional market times. So then there is the tax-free earnings, right? 529 plans, Coverdell, and Roth, all tax advantages there. Mutual funds and stocks, as we just mentioned, there's no real tax advantage there. When it comes to flexibility, what can I use them for? Does it have to be used for college? 529 Coverdell. If you don't use it for college, right, there's a penalty depending on how you draw it, and then there's the income tax due. Then there's the on the earnings. Then there's the Roth IRA. very flexible, right? We can use that for retirement and college savings. Then mutual funds and stocks, pretty flexible, right? You can do anything you want with those. And then, as we mentioned, the plans that are counted for financial aid. That's 529, the Coverdell, and mutual funds and stocks. Those assets. So they're going to look at your assets and everything when they calculate things for you. But the only one that isn't counted are retirement accounts. So the Roth IRAs aren't counted for federal or college financial aid formulas. So that is a strong tool, as we have mentioned, on many different aspects. So now that we've gone through these options, let's look at them with a hypothetical couple. So we have Heather and Joe. Let's meet them. They have two children, 7 and 4. Combined income of 155,000. That's important. They're below the threshold to contribute. They can contribute to a Coverdell, Roth. They're good there. 26,000 windfall. They inherited some money. It happens. So they don't know what to do with it. And they would also like to make monthly contributions to a college fund, right? So they're saying, hey, what options do we have available to us? Well, here's what they can do. First, we want to look at the tax advantage options, right? As we kind of highlighted time and time over here. Contribute to the 529. Let's say they don't want to, every 529 can be a little different, but the prepaid, but let's say they don't want to limit to a college in their state, right? So they want to go with a 529 college savings plan instead of the prepaid. Some states, the prepaid will apply to out of state, but for the most part, that's kind of, depending on each state, it's a little different, right? You want to look at the feature of your state. But that's kind of, let's say with this situation, they would prefer to go with a savings plan. Open one for each child. They got that $26,000 inheritance, so let's get those going with that inheritance. Let's say they choose a portfolio in their 529. They should monitor it periodically, right? At least once a year, twice a year maybe, um, 4 times a year at most. I wouldn't go too much more than that. But then from there, we put the 529s, they can get that going, and then they can contribute to those regularly, right? So that's a good way to contribute regularly, and as we mentioned, do what they can do to contribute, right? It doesn't need to be a specific amount. If you want to get down to planning wise, yes, there's going to be a specific amount you should hit to get that 50% mark. However, get started. So let's get them started. So then from there, they could fund one or two Coverdell accounts, right? Because their income's below that $190,000 threshold. And let's say they like a stock they've been looking at, right? And they want to buy it. They could buy that stock inside of the Coverdell and hold it. And pretty much just kind of allow that to be a complement to the 529. And they can contribute unexpected money to that too. So let's say they, again, another 26,000 comes or whatever it may be, they can put more money into that, right? It could be a 529. They pretty much have set payments on it, and then the Coverdell through maybe a little bit more in there, and they just kind of throw extra in there when they have unexpected money coming in. It could open a Roth. Hopefully they've started saving for retirement by this point. Um, they're below that threshold. We get them going with that, right? Obviously it can be used for two different tools, for retirement and college planning. So we got a little plan in place, right? I know the numbers aren't exact here with what they're doing with every dollar, but we don't have those. But with that being said, let's say their youngest child, the oldest child, begins going to college before they're 59 and a half, right? That means they will not pay income taxes on that money from the Roth if they pull out for college, but they will, pay the tax on the earnings, which is fine. But that's going to be treated how that because they're under 59 and a half. Then at that second child, the younger one, when they get into college, and let's say they're after 59 and a half, then they can withdraw the money for any. There's no penalties or taxes due. So, um, it can be used differently depending on your age, but also it's pretty significant to help, put the big plan together. So, alrighty. So let's pause here for some questions and a little water break.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Mehdi. Okay, so I did actually get some questions through the chat. Can you guys hear me now?
Yeah, hear you
Okay.
now.
We did get some questions through the chat, so I'm going to go ahead and ask those questions. If anybody has more questions, please utilize the question and answer tool on your toolbar. It should say Q&A, and they'll come directly to me, and then we can either ask them at the end of the presentation, or we can follow up with you directly. So if you have any questions, they're confidential, so don't worry about your scenario. If you want to get more specific with your situation, or you can call us and we can set you up with an appointment to speak with an advisor like Medi to talk about your specific situation. Okay, so one of the questions we received was, why are there so many 529 plans and how do I choose what one is best for my family?
So good question. So first step you want to do is just figure out how much you're going to be contributing to the account, right? Because certain 529 plans, they have minimums that you have to start up with, right? Like there's the Vanguard Nevada, it's about 3,000 to start up. And you have the College of America, Virginia. There's no real startup. So you want to kind of figure out what your plan is going to be and how much you're going to contribute regularly. All these variables, every plan is going to be a little different. Fees, um, you kind of pay for what you get in a way, but you do have to shop it around. So every state is going to be a little different. And the real difference, you can use the 529s in any state, but and you can pick any 529 from any state, but the difference is going to be really the investment options, the fees and expenses for the most part, and the way you can use the funds, the maximum contributions, the minimum, things like that. Those are the details that are going to be different. So great question. Hey Kelly, you there?
Oh, I'm so sorry. Okay.
Yeah.
I was on mute. I said that you were on mute while I was on mute. Anyways.
Oh.
Okay. Okay, one of the questions is, what if my child receives a scholarship?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So let's look at it. You got the prepaid, right? So we're in Florida, so I'll kind of just use that as a reference, and I hope that applies to most people. But if it doesn't, then reach out to us and we can give you an answer, as Kelly mentioned. But so if your child receives a scholarship prepaid, you can get a refund for that same amount as pretty much what it would have paid for the public colleges or university in Florida. Comes to the 529, it can be used to make up the difference, and then you can withdraw up to the amount of the scholarship without having to pay the 10% penalty, but you'll have to pay taxes on the earnings. So if they do get a scholarship, great. The money's not going to waste. It can be used different ways. You can always assign it to a different child. Maybe one might get a scholarship, one might not. You can be creative with it, but for the most part, your funds are going to be okay if your child gets a scholarship.
Okay. This is actually a question here. Um, I have a Roth IRA for my retirement. Would I create a separate one for each of my kids?
No, you wouldn't be able to do that. So when it comes to the Roth, and it's also let's put it in the traditional IRA, you can only contribute 6,000 if you're under age 50 to either ones, right? So you have a 6,000, you can only put 6,000 in a Roth or 6,000 traditional. You can't do both, right? So you have to look at that. But you cannot open a Roth for each child. You can't do that. No, it's going to be the Roth is going to be under your name. It's going to be your retirement account. So if you do need, you and the significant other that's in the picture, but that's pretty much your option. And it
Okay.
has to be earned income. So that's one thing you have to consider with the Roth.
Okay. And last one before we get started again on the presentation. Where and how do I find or open a Roth IRA?
Yeah. So Roth IRA, you can open that at most financial institutions and banks. Um, reach out to your institution. They'll be able to open one for you. Reach out to an investment advisor. They'll be able to open one for you. You can go online and open one. Go to any of these brokers' websites. There's a variety of ways to do it. I would recommend doing it the way you feel most comfortable, right? So if you think you don't need any assistance, advice on how to contribute, what to do, et cetera, et cetera. If you don't need that advice, you can go directly to the company. But if you need some advice, you can reach out to an advisor who can guide you, get you in the right thing, and help you pick the investments, et cetera. but you have a lot of options. So there's a lot of ways to do it, and it shouldn't be difficult.
And again, just to reiterate, if anybody does have questions or further questions, please reach out to us and we can go ahead and set you up with your financial advisor here with the participant effect to answer your questions and get you more comfortable with your decisions. You can email us at wellness@theparticipanteffect.com, or our number here is 888-968-9168, and that'll come to me, and I'll go ahead and schedule you with your financial advisor. Okay? All right, so let's go ahead and get started back with the presentation. We'll do some more questions at the end of the presentation given how much time we have. And again, if we don't have time to get to everyone, we'll follow up with you directly. Okay? All right, thanks, Mehdi.
Thank you. All right, so jump back into it. I'm sure you remember this slide, right? A little bit earlier, the building blocks of how we're going to pay for college, right? So, pretty much the most important piece, right, is usually your college savings, what you're gonna save. But that's just one piece, right? So we got other pieces that come into play. Some of them we can kind of count on, some who really can't. But for the most part, you got your financial aid, your income, home equity loan, as we mentioned, being creative with cutting costs, encouraging them to graduate in 3 years instead of four, becoming an RA to save on room and board. There's other things, right? So these are all potential options, but and the goal is for you to know that they're out there, right? But let's talk about one of these resources more specifically, financial aid, because um, a lot of people believe it's going to cover a good portion of their child's college costs, but that may or may not be true, right? So let's talk about that a little bit more in depth. Different types of financial aid, right? It's a broad term. It's money given to students primarily by the federal government and the colleges, and it's to pay for college, right? It can take different forms: loans, grants, scholarships, work study, and obviously they're not created equal, right? Because some of them you have to pay back, some you do not. Loans have to be repaid, and grants and scholarships do not. So, in a perfect world, let's maximize grants and scholarships while minimizing loans. How do we do this? Well, we got to understand how they're going to pull their numbers, right? And then we got to understand what's out there. So, there's two main grants: the Pell Grant and the Supplemental Education Opportunity Grant. They're usually limited to students with the greatest financial need. So if you don't think you're in that box, I wouldn't heavily rely on that. But with that being said, it's usually not a significant amount towards your time, but it's a decent, good amount. It'll help you, but for example, the max Pell Grant in 2018-2019 was about $6,095. So that can definitely help, but there's still a lot of college cost to fund, right? So for larger grant awards, you're going to want to look to individual colleges. You're going to want to look what they have and what they can grant you based off of your needs and your merits, because many of these can be in the tens of thousands of dollars. So obviously, has the cost of college have soared, they've had to and kind of adjust it to so realistically, in the past, you had to apply to college, be accepted, then find out how much grant award you would get. Today, they've changed things, right? So you can get an estimate ahead of time. So all colleges are required by the federal government to have a net price calculator on their website. You can fill this out, as I mentioned before, your child applies. It asks for your income, assets, general student information. Then from there, it will provide an estimate of how much grant your child might receive at that school. So it's going to be different at every school. So this is the financial aid department, the administrators, they're going to help put this together. So the cost of school minus this grant equals the amount your child would estimate the net price, right? So that's what the net price calculator is there. It's a valuable tool, and it takes about 10 to 15 minutes, and it's a great way to compare the net price of different colleges. So this is the net price, what you're going to have to be responsible for. So highly recommend beforehand getting on their website. Again, 10 to 15 minutes, very valuable long-term planning. So how is that need determined? How are they determining how much the need is? Well, first they want to look at your income, your assets, and your family information, right? That's going to be collected on the FAFSA form. That's the financial aid application. They're going to use their formulas, their methods to determine this. And most reference is called the expected family contribution. This is the amount that the government deems you can afford to pay for college that year. I guess they're going to tell you how much you can afford. So, um, in this, the biggest factor is your income and the number of children you have in college at the same time. Right. So that those are going to make the biggest differences in that calculation. And the EFC stays the same. That doesn't change regardless of the college, but the difference of your EFC and the cost of your college is going to change. That's the financial need. That's your child's financial need, and it will be more than likely different at every college. So when they're accepted at school, that financial aid administrator, that department, they'll look at your child's financial need and they will attempt to craft an aid package together for them. And it's going to be based off the needs, right? So it can be a combination of the federal loans, the grants, a work study program. Not everyone can get the work study programs, along with the grants and scholarships. And scholarships, very valuable. Recommend looking into them. I remember a buddy got like a Burger King scholarship, and because no one else applied for it in high school. So there's a lot of options out there. Scour the web, really dig into the scholarships because most people don't do it. So it's really sometimes not that competitive. Sometimes it is, right? But sometimes it's not, and it's surprising. But really, the key though is college. They don't have to meet your child's needs. You're responsible for that. So that's kind of where they come and they try to help. But there's only so much they can do. So when looking at financial aid, what assets do they take into consideration, and what assets do they not take into consideration? Right. So they exclude these assets from its financial aid formula. So home equity, retirement accounts, Roth, traditional IRAs, 401ks, 403bs, annuities, and cash value life insurance. So there's there's a distinction here that should be noted, right? They will exclude these balances though, but if you make contributions the prior year, oftentimes they will look at that. And some private colleges will dig a little deeper into your finances, so that's just something to keep in mind. So let's talk briefly about loans. When you file for FAFSA, they become eligible for certain federal loans. Some of the loans based on financial need, most of them, but one loan, the direct unsubsidized loan, it's open to everybody regardless of the need. And they do have an annual borrowing limit, and it is taken out in the student's name, so they're responsible for paying it back. And then in addition, sometimes this is needed. Parents with good credit, they can take out a Federal Plus loan up to the full cost of their education, but you got to keep in mind you are on the hook for this. And then let's say you get a private loan, you co-sign again, the child can't pay it back, then you're on the hook. So you want to consider these things, and we want to help out. Just keep that in mind. Really, the key we don't want to borrow too much for college, right? We want to maximize the other things, minimize loans, things that we have to repay, and the key really is to save as much as you can before college. You really would just want to limit that amount that you have to borrow. So this pretty much, a lot of people ask, how much should I rely on aid? And the real answer is don't rely on it too much. Uh, it'll be there. It may help, but let's not count on it, right? And then with that being said, financial aid, all of them aren't created equal, right? So the loans versus grants. So the bottom line, really, focus on your savings. This is going to be great when it comes and if it comes, but what we can control is how you're currently saving. So this is a question that we are sure a lot of people thought of, right? So because it is a conflicting, two conflicting goals at times. Is if I have one choice, should I save for college or retirement? And it's a tough question to answer. So let's see what y'all feel about this. Alrighty, well, I think the people have spoken. Um, they're either going to focus on retirement, they're kind of unsure. Let's close that out. So, with that being said, I mean, as you can see with these results, a lot, it seems like the people have a good idea of priorities here. And what it really comes down to is, you can take out loans for college, you can finance that. A lot of tools for college planning. But when it comes to retirement, you cannot take out a loan for funding your retirement, right? I mean, you could, but it's not going to be ideal. So, as we'd like your child to focus on the other ways to pay scholarship grants or part-time job, um, but really the security at retirement is probably the most important thing here, right? And obviously you can balance the two, but let's jump into that a little bit further here. So, like I said, it's a balancing act. You should save for both if you can. Um, like I said, there's no loans, grants, or scholarships for retirement, right? If you take money out of the Roth, you can miss out of many years of tax deferred growth, and that is hard to catch up. You're counting on time and accumulation for your assets. So the key is allocate some there, some here, right? So allocate some for retirement and some for college. Now, if you have to err on the side of savings for retirement, that's guess what we should do. We should probably look at that Roth. So these are going to be things you want to consider. I know you want the priority of getting your child an education is going to be there, but there's other ways for them to do it. There's not many ways for you to fund your retirement. So let's just keep that in mind. Oh, so with that being said, I appreciate y'all's time today. Small steps, again, they can enhance your financial life one day at a time. So questions always welcome. I'll hand it off to Kelly here. I think she has more questions.
Okay. Yep. Okay. So we're going to do some more questions before we end, and we have just about 8 minutes, so that's great.
Alrighty.
Okay. So one of the questions I have here is, can I roll over my existing 529 plan into another state 529 plan?
Okay, good question. So similar to like a retirement account, you can uh, roll it over to into another 529 account once in a 12-month period. But you want to be careful with that because when you go from one state's plan to another, some states do require you to pay state income, and so it's really something you should consider when doing that. But you can absolutely do that. Just make sure you're doing it for the right reasons ultimately.
Okay. All right. Another question is, does Florida prepay have to be used in the state of Florida?
No, no. So it doesn't have to. Now, every state's prepaid is going to be a little different, but Florida, they do allow to where if you go out of state, they will pay you the equivalent amount of in-state tuition. So if you're going to a university in whatever state, then they will give you the amount for what a university would cost in Florida. So good question, but you can be a little flexible with that also.
Okay. Thank you. Let's
Hmm.
do this one is, can you transfer a 529 plan from a child to a grandchild if your child doesn't use it?
Yeah, you can. You can. You can transfer it to a different beneficiary. And a lot of people do that. So that's a great question, great tool. I would just sit down, make sure you make sure everything is good on that before you do that. But yes, that is an option.
Okay. And let's see. This one is, what happens to the 529 funds if you save too much more than the cost of the college? What happens
Yeah.
to the remaining funds?
Yeah. So the remaining funds, they're pretty much if it's not if it can't be pulled out for those specific reasons, right? Then you're gonna have to look at when you pull it out, paying a penalty on that. So that's going to be one of your options, right? Or you can again transfer it to another person. You can be a little creative in that regard. But if you do want to pull the money out of a 529, then you're going to have to look at more than likely that 10% penalty and some more than likely some income tax on the earnings. But what you put into it, your principal, that's your principal, right? They're not going to tax you on the money that you put in there. You already pay taxes on.
Okay, and this will be the last one. It's kind of a big one.
Mhm.
It does seem a little difficult to make the decision about college when you're not sure what direction your child may want to go. I want to create the best savings for my child so when they're ready to make the decision for themselves, they have a financial boost to do so. It sounds like the Roth IRA may be the best for that. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, it's gonna be again, it's gonna be different for everyone's situation. But if we got some space in our contribution to a Roth, it's a great option. If we may use the funds for conflicting goals, as you mentioned, if they might go to college, they might not, da da da. Then the Roth is a great option because again, you can use it for your retirement if they don't use it for college. But it again, it's a tool. It's a part of the plan. Probably maybe not the primary, but if you're approaching retirement, you need to get a little more aggressive with saving for retirement. Then let's lean towards that because again, like we mentioned, you can't finance your retirement.
Okay. And last one, it's a little off topic, sort of, but not
Mhm.
really. When they say, will they garnish my Social Security benefits to pay back my student loans?
Great question. So I've seen this in the news a few times, but essentially they they're pretty flexible in a way with it, right? So if you default on your loan, which means you're really not trying to work with them for 2 years, then they start to garnish Social Security. But with that being said, they will only do up to 15%, and it won't allow you to go below 750 in your what you're receiving. So they can do it, but it's not gonna shouldn't ruin your situation. It may take 15% off the top of what you're receiving, uh, but your monthly benefit can't sink below 750. And you really have to kind of ignore them because it takes 2 years after you default on the loan for them to do that, and you should be able to contact them and modify the repayments and work with them. They're usually pretty flexible in a way, so that's the key there. A good question.
Okay, and I'll do one more, and then we'll wrap it up here.
All right.
Can you set up a Roth in the name of the child instead of yourself if you are over the income limits and can't contribute to your own Roth?
Um, Only if that child has earned income. So if the child has a part-time job, they're making money, then they can. But if they're not earning income, they cannot. So good question.
Okay. All right, great. Well, that's going to conclude our webinar on saving for college. Thank you for joining us, as well as a big thank you to Medi Baker for speaking with us today.
My pleasure.
We'll be
Thank you.
sending out yeah, thank you, Medi. It was great, really. And I have a 2.5-year-old, so I wanted to know all this stuff too.
Perfect. Perfect.
Okay, so we'll be sending out an email with this recording as well as an early registration for our upcoming webinar in June, which is long-term care planning. So be on the lookout for that. If anyone is interested in booking a one-on-one appointment, please feel free to reach out to us at wellness@theparticipanteffect.com. And again, thank you for joining us. Happy spring, and don't forget daylight savings is this weekend, so you're going to be setting those clocks an hour forward on Sunday. Thank you guys. Hope you have a great week.